Well, thank you to the Kohelet Center, and thank you, Moshe, and also Michal for hosting us here. And I would like, you actually said, Europe is not that much of interest to Israel right now and what is happening there. So I tried to twist the topic in a little bit into creeping socialism everywhere. Not only in Europe, but also obviously here in your country you have some tendencies, when I understood Moshe correctly at the beginning, but also in the United States, and I'm sure that John will definitely follow up on the Sanders issue and not only in Sanders but also the other socialist candidates from all parties. And this is also where I would like to tie in Hayek when he dedicated his Road to Serfdom book in 1944 to the socialists in all parties. And this is exactly where we are, and this is where we are standing in Europe, and especially those countries where decisions are being made or supposed to be made. Those countries are, even if they have a so-called conservative government, they are more socialist than any others, because their tendencies in their economic policies are definitely pro-collectivism and against individualism and against individual freedom. And as the Kohelet Policy Forum here has not only individual liberty as their motto, but also national sovereignty, I would like to tie this also into my talk, because if we look at what is happening right now in Europe, we have those three threats, and we started out with the financial crisis. We then came to a real security crisis, and looking at what is happening in the Ukraine and with the Crimea, you may look at this from various aspects, but the point definitely is we haven't given an answer. Whether those on the one side are right, whether the other ones are wrong, I don't want to judge on that, but just the point is that Brussels was unable in more than 3 years to talk with one voice or with one tongue. And this is another threat, and the third one is the so-called migration crisis. And if you look at those numbers, and I won't go further into that, but I just say 80% of the so-called refugees are people coming over from Syria via the Mediterranean route and via the Balkan route. 82% are economic welfare seekers, if you want to look at that, if you want to look at that. And those people just came into our countries by invitation from a certain prime minister because they wanted to be well-meaning. And all these things bear costs, and I just give you two more numbers. The average cost of an asylum seeker, and they are all treated as asylum seekers, is 11,000 euro on the national budget per country in average. And if you add the regional or state level plus the local level into that, then you end up with amounts where our tax levels that are tremendously high will not support, will not be enough in feeding those numbers. And this is a big issue. So we're definitely having a tendency towards more socialism. One other thing that I would like to touch over is the lack of growth in Europe that we see these days. There are only two countries in 2016 that hit the 3% mark, which is Poland and which is Ireland. All the others are far below. Another point that will be a big threat to Europe is actually the lack of productivity and industrial productivity in Europe. And here we are, we see the big drama where we lose competitiveness, and where we lose out not only as individual countries but as the entire continent, and others are just outperforming us. And here it's for Greece, they lost their the industrial productivity shrunk by 28 to 30% within the last 15 years. Okay, you may now blame the financial crisis, but this is homemade problems. When you try to fix a problem with the wrong solution, then it's getting worse and worse, and you just kick the can down the road. And this is what has been done all over, almost, one exception Ireland, almost all over Europe. So Greece with 28 to 31%, Spain and Portugal with 18%, France with 15%, and Italy with 21%. So those levels of industrial productivity are back from 30 years ago. In Italy, I mean, this is incredible. And then you look at the world and look at your country prospering, and this is why I'm not talking about entrepreneurship here. There is no need to do that. It would be like, you know, bringing owls to Athens. And then you see that we lose out. And then when you look at the numbers, and I just looked into the budgets, into the respective ones, and if you see the correlation between government spending and unemployment rates, then it's clear that the more our governments grow, and with each so-called crisis, our governments tend to spend more and more, then the unemployment rate is rising. Of course, as economists we know that, and it's a given, but again, politicians obviously do not understand this correlation. The other set of problems that we see these days is the pension bomb that is ticking, definitely. So the lack of young people that we have in our societies, and of course the cost of our welfare states. And if we look at the countries, and here I would say whether it's Greece, which is a small country with just 10 million people, but France as the second largest economy, or Great Britain and Germany, and also Spain, all of these countries have costs on social protection with 42 to 45% of their GDP, whereas in addition to health, or spending on health with between 11 to 15%, and costs on education, public education, from 7 to also 12%. So now you can add more than two-thirds of the spending per government is on, you know, making sure that the past is being taken care of, and there is no investment into any future whatsoever. And we keep going, we keep following this path, in addition to the lack of productivity, in addition to lack of of growth. This ends in hitting the wall sooner or later. So it's going towards socialism in big steps. And I think if we follow that, it's becoming hell for us. And I think those who are gifted and talented will definitely leave Europe, or will have to leave Europe, because there are no other incentives there. Because the tax levels, as we were talking, or should have talked about in the last panel, are tremendously high. And if we add to that what Panama Leaks does, namely creating more envy, that is already, you know, that we already have, and it's just, you know, putting more oil into the fire. It's getting worse. Don't get me wrong, I don't want to be negative. I have always believed in innovation and creativity, and that we can manage and, you know, make our way around that. But obviously, all our politicians, and I have been in politics myself for 12 years, so I just take the liberty and freedom to bash them. Obviously, they don't see where we are heading. They don't want to see, whether it's, you know, public choice at its best, because they just want to buy votes. And if you give handouts to more than 60% of the population in average in Europe, then you know where you're heading to, if there is no people who achieve and work for it. So with that, I would simply hand over to John, who might describe the socialism that is going on in the United States right now, and giving you some more of these examples. Finally, I just simply want to close with one positive outlook, that there are still a lot of family firms around in our European nations, and that those family firms, which provide 75% of the businesses worldwide, they provide 65% of the jobs that we have in Europe. So this is good news on the one hand, but those people need also to be protected, because they must not be starved to death by governments and by inefficiency. And without further ado, I would just hand over to John and then to Ian. Thank you.
Thank you.